Hello learners. We will learn today about family influences on identity. This is a part of the paper BPCG 175 Psychology of Living Unit 1 Self and Identity Development. I am Professor Parul Bansal from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, University of Delhi. In this topic, we will be studying about what is a family, how are family relations influenced by economic and social structures, and what is the impact of family on self. Isn't it going to be exciting? We all live in a family, but we don't really ever ponder over what is a family. And also, we don't realize that families don't exist in isolation. They are a part of a larger social context. So, they are shaped by the kind of social environments, cultural environments that we live in. And in turn, families shape ourselves. So, let us get on to this exciting journey of learning about family, society, and self. Let's start by discussing the first question. What is a family? Do you live in a family? I'm sure the answer is yes. If you were to think about it, who all are there in your family? We usually try to understand a family in terms of its members. But this discussion will help us to understand that there is more to the family than just the number of members. Family is the basic unit of socialization. According to Burgess and Locke, family is a group of persons united by the ties of marriage, blood or adoption, consisting a single household, interacting and intercommunicating with each other in their social roles of husband and wife, mother and father, son and daughter, brother and sister, creating a common culture. Long definition, isn't it? What is important for us to take away from this definition is, firstly, family is a group of persons. Secondly, it is a group which is united by the ties of marriage, blood, or adoption. And that is what makes it different from other kinds of groups. For example, the caste groups, or the religious groups, or the peer group. In this definition, what is emphasized is a single household, interacting and intercommunicating with each other, husband, wife, mother, father, son, daughter, brother, sister. All of this points towards a certain kind of family. So, we will also be discussing very soon that there are different kinds of family, and this definition applies best to a certain kind of nuclear family, which is based on heterosexual relationships between the two adults. Another important aspect of this definition is common culture. Families are characterized by certain kinds of norms, certain kinds of beliefs and practices which are shared, and that constitute a family. Now, what is a nuclear family that I was just talking about? The nuclear family consists of parents and children living together. However, in India, we also see a lot of other kinds of families. For example, extended and joint families, where two or more nuclear families live together. How do they look like? Let's look at that. Such extended and joint families can take the form of a man and woman living along with their married sons and daughters-in-law, unmarried sons and daughters, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Another form is a group consisting of two or more brothers and their wives and children living together. So, in the case of extended and joint families, there are multiple generations that may live together: grandparents, parents, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren also sometimes. In other cases, you may not have grandparents, but you may have uncles and aunts who live together with your own family. These are very typical living situations and family structures which are found all across India. Family is a dynamic unit and it keeps changing with times. Now we also see various other kinds of families. For example, we see a family consisting only of a couple with no children. We may have families with same-sex parents, with single-parent families, and also blended families due to remarriage. As I was saying before, families don't exist in a vacuum. It is influenced by the social structures and then it affects our self. So, now we will move on to looking at the self, family, and the society interaction. One such model that helps us to understand this interaction is given by a very well-known psychologist who belongs from Turkey called Sigdim Kajitsibasi. Kajitsibasi in 1996 provides an influential analysis of self-family-society interface. This model situates family within the macro, systemic, ecological context by examining its links with social, structural, and economic factors. So, the family is embedded in three different kinds of factors: social, structural, and economic. And as these factors vary across time and societies, families and intergenerational relationships vary too. Let us first look at some of these social, structural, and economic contexts which, according to her, forms the context in which the family operates. In her model, the context is constructed mainly in terms of the culture and the living conditions of the family, and it is seen as an influencing component. Culture is constructed as mainly an individualistic or as a collectivistic domain. Living conditions include urban-rural residence, socio-economic development levels, and the subsistence characteristics of the family. So, what it will mean is whether a family lives in the rural setup or in the urban setting, that will also influence its working. What would be the socio-economic levels of that family? And what is the economic activity in which that family is engaged in? All of this has an impact on the family structure and the various kinds of family constructs, which further affect the kind of self that gets formed in that family. Family structure comprises the demographic variables such as whether it is a nuclear family or a joint family. What are the fertility rates of women in that family? Which means how early are women bearing children? Their intra-family status. Do they have high status? Do they have low status? Are they respected? Do they have the decision-making power? All of these are family structure related aspects which are important in affecting the family functioning. The family system entails two kinds of subsystems: the socialization values and the family interaction. Both of them show variation along the dimension of emphasis which is put on the individual or the group, and also on the economic or the psychological value of children for parents and the family. Family interaction is differentiated in terms of parenting orientations and the resultant self-other relations. And this affects the development of the self. Kajitsi Basi provides 3 family models. These 3 family models are based upon the interactions amongst all the factors that we have spoken about just now, which includes the living conditions, which includes the fertility rates, the woman standing in a family, nuclear or joint family, the socialization values, etc. Kajitsi Basi proposes the first model as the family model of interdependence. An ideal type of such a model is commonly found in the rural or the agrarian traditional societies, which are characterized by patrilineal family structures. Now, what is patrilineal family structure? It is a family structure in which inheritance of property, rights, titles are passed on through the male relative, that is, from the grandfather to the father and then to the son. Families are structurally or functionally extended units. Functionally extended means that even though the families are nuclear, they function as if they were joint in tasks related to production, eating, celebrating festivals, and rearing children. This is made possible by the close proximity of immediate kin spanning different generations. Given the low affluence levels or the low income levels and the agricultural styles, such shared work is highly adapted for survival. An economic and utilitarian value is attached to the children in this family model of interdependence, which means that the value for the children is derived from their material contributions. In the traditional societies of the past and the present, the constant developmental emphasis for adolescent persons is to learn and become competent to share the burden of family maintenance as soon as possible. An adult offspring is the main source of old age security for his elderly parents. In the absence of social security systems and old age pension in this kind of a social structure, there is a high son preference in a patriarchal context because they are more reliable sources of old age security. Such a family structure also entails high female fertility, which implies that women are required to bear more children so as to ensure the survival of enough children, and particularly sons in the face of high infant mortality. Having sons also increases the woman's intra-family status, which is initially quite low, because she is by definition an outsider to the patrilineage at the beginning of the marriage. A collectivist ethos is present at the societal and familial levels. The child's obligations to the parent is ensured through an obedience-oriented socialization and authoritarian parenting. This socialization orientation stresses on family loyalties, control, and dependence of the child. When socialized this way, a child grows up to be obedient and loyal offspring, which would uphold the family needs and would invest in the elderly parents. Whereas an independent child might be more likely to look after one's own individual interests. So, the resultant familial and interpersonal relations in the family model of interdependence are characterized by interdependence along both material and emotional dimensions. The relational self typically develops in this type of family system. People high on this kind of self agree with these kinds of statements. And these statements are taken from the related self in family scale developed by Kajit Sibasi in 2017. The statements are, my family is my top priority. I feel very closely attached to my family. My relationships with my family makes me feel peaceful and secure. We now move on to the second model given by Kajit Sibasi. This is the family model of independence. An ideal type of such a model is commonly found in the Western industrial, urban, suburban middle class society, characterized by an individualistic ethos. In this model, there is independence of the family from other families and of its members from one another. It is distinguished by the separateness of the generations, and both emotional and material investments are channeled towards the child rather than to the older generation. The unit is the individuated nuclear family. There is affluence providing old age security, women's higher intra-family status, low son preference, and low fertility. In this context, especially with mass education, having children entail economic costs, not assets, which means that children are preferred for their psychological value because they are more of a cost. Their education has to be looked into, their well-being has to be looked into, their health is prioritized. So, there isn't as much of an economic value of the children, which means that they are not really helping out in the income of the family or in the work that needs to be done in the family. However, they have psychological value. Children are valued for the pleasures and the satisfactions that parents get by rearing them. There is less control in such kind of childbearing. It entails a relatively permissive parenting compared with the authoritarian parenting of the model of interdependence. Autonomy orientation is stressed in accordance with the prevalent individualistic ideology. Independence and self-reliance are valued in the social, cultural, economic context where intergenerational material dependencies are minimal. What is the meaning of the intergenerational material dependencies? This is what I was mentioning in the previous discussion in terms of the family model of interdependence, where the children are responsible for the old age looking after of their elderly parents, where children have an economic value because they are the providers of elderly care and they also are important supporters in the work that the family has to perform. For example, in the agrarian societies, many children accompany their parents to the farms. They cut the crops and they also do many other tasks around the house. This kind of a material asset understanding of children is not prevalent in the context of the family model of independence. Elderly parents don't depend on their adult children for their livelihood. They have other sources of income and services in old age. This type of socialization is conducive to both intergenerational and interpersonal independence. It engenders the development of the independent, separate self. People high on this kind of a self tend to agree with these statements. These statements are taken from the autonomous self in family scale by Kajit Sibasi in 2017. The autonomous scale is characterized by statements such as, I feel independent of my family. I do not have to think the way my family does. Moving on to the third family model given by Kajit-Sibasi. This is a family model of psychological interdependence. This model differs from the previous two that we have spoken about, which is the family model of independence and family model of interdependence. But there are certain overlaps with these two models. The distinguishing mark of the first model of interdependence is that the familial and the individual interdependence is present in both material and emotional dimensions. So children are looked upon as assets. They contribute to the family income. They support the family tasks. And also, they are looked upon as sources of old age security. And so, there is an emphasis on loyalty and obedience. On the other hand, the second model, which is the family model of psychological independence, is distinguished by independence in both familial and individual levels, in both material and emotional dimensions. This means that children have a psychological value. They are brought into the world by the parents because of the joy and pleasure in bringing them up. And there isn't much of an expectation from them that they would look after the parents in their old age. So, children are brought up with a sense of independence, with a sense of that they can make their choices, take their decisions by themselves, not so much bothered by what the parents want and what the family requirements are. The third model, which I am now going to elaborate in more detail, is the family model of psychological interdependence, which includes aspects of both of these models. It manifests interdependence in the emotional realm in both family and individual levels, but it entails independence in both levels in the material realm. This model is more typical of the developed urban areas of the world with collectivist cultural base. What is being witnessed here is structural and economic changes alongside cultural continuity. On one hand, there is decreased importance of patrilineage and the corresponding increased women's status, lower fertility, and lower son preference. Accordingly, the material value of children is also low, which means that they are not seen as assets, but as costs. But there are sustained psychological, emotional interdependencies between generations. Emotional investments of young adults go both towards their elderly parents and towards their children. Socialization values continue to be emphasized in the family and the group. Loyalties to family and group are considered to be important. However, individual loyalties are emerging as well. This has implications for child rearing practices as well. Alongside parental control, reflecting the continued importance of closely knit families and human bonds, there is room in this family system for the individual loyalties and autonomy as well. Autonomy emerges in this kind of a family system of interdependence for two reasons. Firstly, given the decreased material dependencies of the parents on the adult offspring, the child's autonomy is no longer seen as a threat to the family livelihood. Secondly, with changing lifestyles, autonomy becomes an asset for success in school and urban employment that require active decision making, agency, and innovation rather than obedience. Parents feel unsure of their ability to guide and mentor their children in the new economy, and young are thrown more on their own powers to develop their roadmap of life. The self that emerges out of such a matrix of factors is the autonomous related self. It integrates the two basic human needs of agency and belonging. The autonomous related self in family scale, developed by Kajit Sibasi in 2017, provides certain statements which are endorsed by people who are high on this kind of an autonomous related self. The first statement is one should not hesitate to express his or her ideas even if he or she values his or her family. The second statement is a person may be very close to his or her family and at the same time can make his or her decision. The third statement is a person can feel both independent and emotionally connected to his or her family. So here I would like to sum up Kajit Sibasi's model on society, family and self interface. What Kajit Sibasi is trying to tell us in this model is that families are shaped by the surrounding economic, social and the structural factors. So in traditional agrarian, collectivistic kinds of cultures, a certain kind of family structure develops where material and emotional interdependencies are fostered, resulting in a particular kind of self, which is the interdependent self. On the other hand, in the westernized urban cultures, because of the increasing affluence, nuclear families abound, and the kind of self that gets developed over there is the autonomous self. Here, the emotional and material dependencies are low, and the child is encouraged to take a path of one's own without so much being concerned about the family norms, the responsibility towards the parents. The third family model of psychological interdependence may be what is something that we are witnessing in our kinds of contexts, which is the developed locations in the collectivistic cultures, where the value of the child is no longer material, but emotional dependencies are still present, which means that the young adult must be responsive to the needs of the elderly parents, but at the same time towards their own children. This results in a certain kind of a socialization and child rearing practice where both autonomy and responsibility are emphasized. And this results in a kind of a hybrid self, which is called the autonomous related self. I now move on to another concept, which is the influence of parenting styles on self. Since parents are so important in the growth of children, psychologists have placed considerable research efforts in investigating the quality of parent-child relationships and the parenting styles. The parenting styles refer to the practices that parents adopt in relating to their children and its effect on children. The most influential work in this field is of Diana Baumrind in 1971, which led to the identification of the 4 parenting styles. McCoby and Martin in 1983 stated that these 4 parenting styles are based on 2 dimensions of parental behavior. The first is responsiveness and warmth, and the second is demandingness or control. Both of these dimensions can vary in terms of being high or low, and when they intersect with each other, they create 4 parenting styles, which are permissive, authoritarian, authoritative, and uninvolved. Let us now look at each of these parenting styles. The permissive parent is low on demandingness and high on responsiveness. They have low expectations of conduct and achievement from their children. They have an attitude of do what you want. They are lenient and rarely they discipline their children. However, they emphasize on relatedness. They provide loving support and encourage the free expression in their children. On the other hand are the uninvolved parents who are low on both demandingness and warmth. They may have multiple tasks to attend to along with parenting. Thus, they may pay little attention to their children and they do not invest emotionally much in bringing their children up. In short, they don't care much. They do not protect discipline and set limits for their children. Alongside, they also do not have much emotional attachment for them. They also do not express much love for them. The third parenting style is the authoritative parent. Such parents are high on demandingness and high on responsiveness. They have high expectations for conduct and achievement for their children. They set clear rules and norms to follow. However, they discuss matters of discipline, explain the reasons for the rules, and negotiate and compromise if need be. Also, they are warm and tuned into their children's needs and desires. They show care and flexibility. The fourth pattern is that of the authoritarian parent. Please don't get confused between the authoritative parent and authoritarian parent. The authoritarian parent is high on demandingness and low on responsiveness, whereas the authoritative parent is high on demandingness and also high on responsiveness. The authoritarian parent, which is high on demandingness and low on responsiveness, impose their rules and norms, and they expect their obedience from children. Children are not involved in discussions and negotiations about matters that affect them. These parents respond to children's questions to authority by saying, "Because I say so." Such parents are not attuned to their children's emotions and feelings. They are punitive in their punishments. Beaumorin describes authoritative parenting as the just right style of parenting. These are the parents who are high on both the dimensions of discipline as well as of responsiveness and warmth. Children in such households are more likely to grow up with a sense of independence and responsibility, reinforcing their beliefs that they can eventually take care of themselves successfully. It promotes self-regulation, appropriate assertiveness, critical thinking skills, and self-confidence. The authoritarian parenting, on the other hand, impedes development of empathy and self-assuredness amongst children. These are the parents who have very high control, but they are not warm. So, such children tend to be conforming, passive, and dependent. Since they feel emotionally controlled by their parents, They are less self-assured, less creative, and less socially adept than other adolescents. Children of permissive parents are more likely to experiment with both positive and negative behaviors. As they do not fear repercussions, they tend to be less responsible and get easily drawn into negative social behaviors. They are higher in self-confidence but lower in academic achievement. They are also more likely to show greater aggression and hyperactivity as compared to other children. Baumrind in 1991 found that children whose parents have an uninvolved parenting style, which means that they are neither setting any boundaries nor are they showing any kind of warmth. These are the children who have the worst outcomes on a number of behavioral and psychological measures. These children demonstrate high rates of problem behaviors and drug use. Moreover, children of neglectful parents tend to rank low in terms of cognitive and emotional empathy development, which is considered to be of significant importance with regard to positive social development. So, what kind of parenting practice is most common in Asian cultures like India? Isn't that the question that comes to your mind? The most common parenting practice in Indian culture is similar to the authoritative parenting. Again, I urge you to not get confused with authoritarian parenting. Authoritative parenting is where the responsiveness and the demandingness of the parents both are high. However, the responsiveness and the demandingness shown by the Indian parents do not fit into the acceptable meanings of these dimensions which are found in the Western culture. For example, parents in the Indian culture rarely praise their children. Don't we often feel very sad about that? But now that you know that it is a cultural aspect of not praising our children, and especially in the presence of others. And they also often do not show open love and affection towards children. But they are responsible for the well-being of their children. They support them financially and emotionally and continue to remain involved with the matters of their lives well into adulthood. You must be seeing around yourself families where married adults continue to live with their elderly parents, and the elderly parents are very tuned into the lives of this young couple, providing emotional support and many times even financial support. Also, Indian parents do not engage much in debate and discussion. They usually expect compliance from their children. However, this is not the kind of compliance which you see in the case of an authoritarian parent, where it comes as a dictate, do as I say. Here, the compliance is demanded keeping the child's interest in mind. Also, the social change is affecting parenting, and now Indian parents are allowing greater freedom and flexibility to the children to decide their own course of action while remaining as their guides. So with this, we wrap up the discussion on the family influences on self. I hope you enjoyed it. It will be great fun for you to look at yourself, examine yourself to see which kind of the psychological model does your family fit in, your broader milieu fits in, and what kind of self is present in you as stated by Kajitsi-Basi. You can also try to decipher what is the most close kind of parenting style which is present in your family. Are your parents practicing the authoritarian parenting, authoritative parenting, permissive parenting, or neglectful parenting. Also, please remember that there may be a mix of these. Pure types usually don't exist, and sometimes one parent adopts a particular style more consistently as compared to the other parent. Happy figuring out all of this for yourself. Thank you.